one of my main reasons I think that you shouldn't vote for the Labour Party in general elections is because they're not going to give you proportional representation. Trying to get the Labour right, who are in control of the party, to accept proportional representation when it fundamentally both diminishes their power as a political entity to pass policy by making it less likely for them to have a majority with proportional representation. It also means that they don't have a grip over a bunch of leftoids within the party because otherwise the leftoids can just leave and set up one of their own. Also, the electoral mass, when there is a vote split on the quote-unquote left in the country, would mean that the Labour right get less ability to be able to set the policy direction for Labour to try and win over Conservative voters rather than going for the other left-wing voters who they are competing with far more parties than they are on the right. So trying to get the Labour right to accept proportional representation is a fool's errand. Phil, from a different bias, friend of the show, begs to disagree. He wants to get Starmer's Labour behind proportional representation, which he thinks he can do by continually voting for the Labour right forever. So he's someone who is pissing into the wind, quite frankly, but I'll be interested to see his arguments for how that can even be possible, or what he's going to try and argue as to why you can definitely still support the Labour right and Keir Starmer and the Labour Party as it currently is in its current fashion, and get some kind of hope of electoral reform down the line without a hung parliament forcing their hand. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe his knowledge of politics will transcend my baby brain into thinking that there was some kind of way to give Keir Starmer a massive first past the post majority, and then him go, in the wake of this massive majority, what I'm going to do is make sure that I can never get this massive majority again, as if that's ever going to happen. But we'll see. Maybe his big brain will outshine mine.
Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I would like to discuss proportional representation and Labour again, as Starmer's spokesperson poured more water on the idea that Labour will be getting behind the move anytime soon, which we sort of knew anyway, but also how people are misinterpreting what was actually said and how people are also missing something else Starmer said, which puts PR squarely on the table, but for a future election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel.
Hi, Mr. Phil Morehouse. I would like to inspect your wallet, please. How many times are the pro-PR and anti-Brexit people going to have their wallets inspected by the Labour right? I mean, come on, right? Would you like to buy some magic beans as well whilst you're at it? Would you like to buy this bridge, right? Oh, come on, Phil. I know it's secret. It's just a secret ploy where he's leaving the option open. You might do it at a later time. Who knows? It's all smoke and mirrors. Come on, Phil. You're smarter than this. Even with the amount of scorn I've poured upon your work in the time of doing this channel and reacting to your content, I know that you're smarter than just not to get completely hoodwinked by unscrupulous politicians. But I guess what happens when you're a massive cuck to the Labour Party?
Channel. So an article in Byline Times got a lot of people hopping about, where it reported on some things which Keir Starmer's spokesperson said about the Labour leader's attitude towards proportional representation. Now, the fact that it was the spokesperson talking, not Starmer, doesn't make any difference, because they wouldn't say anything on Starmer's behalf without having discussed it first. And if they did say something out of turn accidentally, it would have been hastily corrected. The main issue I have is with how some people have been reporting this, and they're basing their thoughts on a report in a newspaper, albeit a good newspaper, where the actual conversation was not quoted. In political statements, every word is carefully considered. So when you don't actually report the word said, then it's easy to jump to the wrong conclusions. The only word...
Yeah, exactly. The words have been specifically said in such of a way to give there some level of plausible deniability so that he never has to commit to any fucking positions in the first place. We literally had journalists were being briefed upon this when the pledges were being written for his leadership campaign, under the proviso that they knew they were going to eventually break them because they only stood on those pledges to get elected leader of the Labour Party in the first place. But of course, Phil doesn't think these things are pledges. He thinks these were positions, even though it literally still says pledges on Keir Starmer's website, of all things. But they were written in such a way so that they could be completely undermined later on, and there was some kind of plausible deniability get-out clause, right? That's why. I mean, he's correct. They need to be reported correctly, but correctly so that we all know, the people here who are fans of their wallets, who are not interested in buying magic beans can actually properly interpret the actual meaning of these statements, rather than pretending actually he's on our side all along. He's not just trying to hoodwink us to be able to become prime minister.
Word out of the entire exchange, both question and answer that was reported, was yes. So let's go through what the article does and doesn't say, and I'll link it, of course, below for people to read at their leisure if they haven't already. So it does say that proportional representation isn't a priority for Keir Starmer. Is that the same thing as saying he's no intention to ever deliver it? No. Is it saying that we can forget about seeing it in his first manifesto? Yeah, that's it, basically. And that's also not new. He's been saying that for a couple of years. So next thing in the article, it describes Starmer as saying he has a long-standing view against proportional representation. Now, this is new. But it is also...
It's almost like it's a lie. It's almost like he lied before when, during the leadership election, he said that a electoral system was unfair and needed changing. It's almost like this is directly contrary to exactly what he was saying during the Labour leadership election. Is anyone else sensing a pattern here as to the history of Keir Starmer with holding one position one point and then saying a completely different thing when it's electorally convenient for him to do so? Isn't that a bit weird? Do you not find that strange?
Also been misinterpreted in two ways. First, people refer to a statement he made a few years ago where he said, the fact that many people feel their vote goes to waste needs addressing.
This is pre-recorded content, Phil. If you say the wrong thing, you can just edit it out, right? I mean, I'm not going to harp on that much because I don't edit any of my fucking statements, right? Whenever I put a segment up, I just go chop, change, put it on. But then again, this is his job. My job is working in a call centre. I don't have all day to edit content.
People are this week trying to claim he was supporting PR at the time and now has backtracked. But he wasn't. In fact, many of the Kick Starmer out brigade who are trying to take this line have consistently said that he's never backed PR. So how come all of a sudden they now think that he did and he's backtracking?
Source? Citation needed? Where have we ever said that? Because I'm definitely part of the Kick Starmer out crowd because I have a functioning brain and care about the working class. But you know, we've always said that he explicitly stood on positions that he now doesn't hold during the leadership election, right? And fundamentally, I don't really care what he did or didn't say beforehand, even though I've never said anything different. Again, find me some quotes of some leftoids saying that he was never supported of proportional representation, because I don't think that's the people who exist. He's more in tune with internal Labour Party politics, so maybe he knows more than I do. I don't know. The real issue is A, his position sucks because he should support some kind of electoral reform, and B is the fact that the party conference continue to keep voting in favour of electoral reform, and he is, as always with all policy, ignoring the fucking members of the party who elected him to be able to put through the policies that they want. Because he doesn't care about the membership, he doesn't care about the Labour left, he doesn't care about the unions, he cares about himself and his little cadre of his little right-wing cronies at the top of the party who are trying to maintain power forever. I'm sorry, again, it's just a real blinker, it's just another fucking wallet inspection moment.
All he's saying in the video is that people should not feel their vote is being wasted. PR is one way to stop people feeling their vote is being wasted, and it is the obvious option. It's certainly my preferred option, but it isn't the only one. For example, Starmer may feel that when people have more say in local decision making as a result of his decentralisation plans and reform of the House of Lords, that he will have addressed it. This will be especially true if the way we elect
so he's literally saying, right, actually, he's not going to change the whole electoral system. And you're an idiot for thinking that he was going to change the electoral system when he said people's votes don't count and they feel like they don't have a voice because their vote is completely useless in their area. He wasn't actually referencing the Westminster electoral system. He was just saying he was going to give them more a voice by having community votes and having an elected House of Lords. Is that not enough for you, proles? Is that not enough that we continue to have first past the post that give me personally the thing that I want, which is a massive majority in the House of Commons? But you're going to get other votes elsewhere, right? And that's what he was really saying, was he was deliberately, again, trying to put across the opinion of something with this plausible deniability that I was talking about before. God, it's really infuriating. to have people like Phil talk down to people like me and say, well, actually, no, you were an idiot for thinking that what he obviously meant was what obviously implied with this statement was what he actually meant. What he really meant was this other thing, which is different from what everyone thought he meant, but can be easily interpreted from the words if you look back thinking about some kind of other change of tack that he wants to go down. It's so duplicitous, right? And really patronising as well. To say that, well, you're just an idiot for thinking that he meant what everyone thought, what everyone would have intuited from what he said. What he actually meant was this other thing that's slightly different, kind of similar, that you could slightly, if you look at the words a certain way, might mean this. Come on, Phil. Come on. Like, again, it's trying to defend the indefensible.
New representatives in the new House of Lords is via a system like PR. Will he have solved it to everyone's satisfaction? No. But will he be able to claim that he has addressed the issue, which he pointed out in 2020? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. He will have addressed it. Yeah, he'll have addressed the issue. I don't know what you're all moaning about, pro-electoral reform people. He said a nebulous statement that could be interpreted several different ways, and the way that literally everybody interpreted it happens to be the wrong one. Don't you feel like a moron now, people on the Labour left? Come on.
The second way it's been misinterpreted is in believing that it must mean he's against PR as a concept and will not introduce it under any circumstances while he's leader. No, this is just wrong. There's nothing even subjective about it. Byline Times, as I say, have not reported the exact words in the exchange. Now, I'm not suggesting that they're trying to misrepresent what he said. I'm quite sure they're not. But when you leave blanks, people will fill the blanks in. Like, politicians often deliberately leave blanks, as I'll explain later in this video. My personal view is that journalists should not. For example, what if the spokesperson was simply talking about the first term in office? What if the journalists asking the questions didn't pin down exactly what they meant? What if they did and just didn't report it?
Again, it's just, this is he's just literally, he's got a rapid fire cannon, like throwing out multiple different copies of his wallet. So would anyone like to inspect any of my millions of wallets, everybody? It's literally what he's doing right now. Again, I mean, the thing is, the position that I hold with regards to the criticism of Keir Starmer on this one is that there are two criticisms. First of all, is that he lied originally during the leadership campaign to try and hoodwink members of the Labour electorate to put him in the position that he then changed from, right? That's one criticism. And the second point is, we all knew, and everybody who has a functioning brain, that he was never going to stick to these principles. It was always some level of deception going on, given the fact that the person who ran his campaign also ran Owen Smith's campaign, and, you know, it was very clear that he was from the right wing of the party. Novara did good work exposing how he was being run by clearly part of the Labour right faction, which is why he should have been on the bottom of everyone's rank choice, as far as I'm concerned, with the leadership of the Labour Party, which, quite frankly, you should have voted for Rebecca Long-Bailey. And if you did vote for Keir Starmer, I understand why you did, but you shouldn't have done.
Really important when reading any account to focus on what is known and what a blank's been filled in. And it's actually especially important when it is a spokesperson talking. Because
you bought all the skills wallets cheap off Joe Swinson. Oh my god. I mean, skills wallets is going to be like the meme that never dies. At least it won't die on this channel. We will never let the skills wallets meme die.
Although the spokesperson will not say anything that hasn't been pre-approved with Starmer beforehand, when the policy changes a few years down the line and someone says, oh, but your spokesperson said this, he can turn around and go, oh, no, I didn't realise they'd said that. I didn't actually mean that. Oh, there was lost in translation. Happens all the time. Spokespeople are brilliant for that because they can say something which at the time you want them to say, and then years later say, oh, they must have misunderstood me. And you haven't lied and you haven't U-turned. Someone just misunderstood a thing. You know, but it's natural for us want to fill in blanks, and politicians know that. We want to fill in blanks for an incomplete picture. It's just how our brain works.
I tell you what this reminds me of. This reminds me of a Jordan Peterson fan. It literally reminds me of Jordan Peterson fans who will go, well, actually, no, I think you'll find he didn't mean exactly what anyone with a functioning brain thought he meant, but he left all of this plausible deniability within this Mott and Bailey fallacy that we've constructed here, and you're just not smart enough to realise exactly what he really meant.
So how do I respond to this latest article? Well, it contains the line about not being a priority still. And that's been the line for the last few years. It's not a priority, not a priority. That basically proves that they're not ruling it out forever. If they were saying it was a bad policy, they would describe it as such. Not a priority means, actually...
No, they can't say it's a bad policy, right? Because they want to ensure that dupes like you keep supporting them, even though there is literally no functional reason why anybody in Keir Starmer's position would ever support any kind of electoral reform, outside of maybe ranked choice voting. Because actually, they really should support if you are the Labour right, you should support ranked choice voting, because in a political system, it skews over to a lot of left-wing vote splitting with a coordinated right. The alternative vote actually really does help Labour. It would increase Labour's seats. It would increase Lib Dems too, but it would actually, the only people who lose out from the alternative vote is the Conservative Party. But it's not the reason why he's saying, well, actually, I don't agree. It's not a priority for me. Isn't because he actually genuinely wants to do it, but doesn't want to look like he's doing it. It's the other way around, right? He wants to ensure that it never happens, whilst making sure that plenty of the different kind of voices for some kind of progressive electoral reform continually voting for him under the proviso that he might do it eventually some point down the line. But unfortunately, anyone with a basic sense of material analysis, which you won't have, Phil, because you're a liberal, will understand that there is literally... Why would he do it? Why would he do it? Give me one good reason that Keir Starmer would ever support proportional representation from his position, when we know that he doesn't want to be able to properly input the wishes of the Labour conference, right, the Labour membership. We know that he will completely ignore any of their policies, and he admits so as much in the prospect thing that they put out for future donors to the party. They've admitted they don't want to listen to the membership at the conference. What would he materially gain outside of the moral high ground, which we all know that Keir Starmer clearly doesn't care about, given his things that he said about Rishi Sunak with the attack adverts, what he said about trans people in basically every interview he's ever given on the issue, and what he says regarding refugees and stopping the boats. Like, this man is not some kind of pillar of moral integrity, Phil, and you know full well that he's not. So the idea that he would just somehow support a political policy that is basically complete, like the direct opposite of his personal material interest, is delusional. It's delusional. It's completely delusional. It's the only way of describing it.
It might be a good idea, just not an urgent idea. And there are two things which I would say are really important to bear in mind in this specific case. The first is that Labour in opposition makes certain statements to hype up or down a concept, but then miraculously seem to change it in office. Now, I don't mean they promise one thing in the manifesto and deliberately fail to deliver. That's just the Tories and maybe more recently the DUP. I mean that they nullify accusations of promising unrealistic benefits by toning many of them down. Labour did it in the 90s. Just like now. In the 90s, they were cool on the idea of major public sector pay rises because at the time the Tories were suppressing public sector pay and people were going, well, Labour should really be boosting it, and Blair was a bit quiet on it. But we still got those big pay rises when they were in power. It was like...
I wonder where the money for that came from, Phil. Don't mention the PFIs.
Before the election, you would think, oh, we're not really going to get very much. After the election, we got it. And that's because all voters wanted to know was that Labour would focus on certain key priorities and not try to do too much and end up making a mess of it all. But once you're in power, as long as you are seen to be delivering those core priorities, people are not going to object to you delivering even more. Consider that one of the major learning points to emerge from post-election polling after the 20...
And again, right, maybe on some nebulous things like the amount of public sector pay that's on offer, and it's clear that public sector pay rose more under New Labour than it did under the Tories, although clearly not as much as it should have done, as Fancy Wookie is clearly pointing out correctly in chat. But Big Al is also correct in chat in saying that any actual genuine big change would have to be in the manifesto, otherwise it would just get shut down in the Lords based upon that principle alone. So something like, for example, proportional representation, a gigantic sweeping change to the way in which our electoral system would work, that has to be in the manifesto. They cannot not be in the manifesto. Because it doesn't just change the way that you vote, it changed the way the constituencies are divvied up. The Electoral Commission would have to do a massive sweeping new layout of how the entire electoral system works to be able to put that through. That would have to be in the manifesto. There's a difference between, we might just be coy about how much public sector pay we're going to do and massive constitutional changes. That's why Keir Starmer was outwardly saying, literally a couple of years ago, that his priority was Lords reform, because he knows that he can't not stand on that as a manifesto pledge to get elected, to then actually have it put into place. But again, of course, Phil is a dupe and thinks that he's being told that there's a future open door for proportional representation. Well, it's never going to fucking happen.
19 general election is that people broadly approved of the policies in Corbyn's manifesto. They just didn't believe he'd deliver it. It was all too much. It seemed too much. It was too much. So the 90s demonstrated that it is better to focus your offer in the general election and then over-deliver in government, deliver more. Now, I'm not saying that Labour are suddenly going to flip to PR in their first term. It's clear that that's not going to happen. It's clear that Starmer wants his reform of the House of Lords and decentralising decision-making first. These are huge reforms that will easily eat up an entire parliament or more to deliver them. But just because a Labour leader downplays certain policies doesn't mean they're ruling them out, even if it sounds like it. Even if they say it explicitly, which he isn't here, because it's happened before. It's not hypothetical. Anyone who observed Labour during the last years of their previous period in opposition and then what happened in government, we've seen it all played out before. The second thing to consider is that political statements are always...
And again, there's a big difference between the Blair government didn't promise on public sector pay and then over-delivered in government, when that is within the material interest of the Blair government to do so, because people like public sector pay rises, right? And it's within their interest to make sure that they get further elected. It would increase their support giving public sector pay rises. That's why they would do it. They have a material interest in doing so. The opposite is true for proportional representation and for Sir Keith, right? There's literally no reason for him to do it. The only reason why he's putting out the statement is to try and get people who are desperately clinging that anything that they want will be given to by Keir Starmer, and he's repudiated literally every claim that these people want. These people desperately want Brexit reversed. He has full-throatedly supported the ERG red lines. They want proportional representation, and he's not even just ditched that, but said that he has a long-standing view against it, as quoted in Byline Times right here. And these other people want something progressive, want progressive reform on things like immigration, when Keir Starmer is going down the conservative line on these issues. These people are they are addicted. They are literally addicted to buying magic beans.
Is deliberately intended to be ambiguous. To win, Labour need maybe 13 million votes. The Tories will claim to offer 100% of what voters want. They will claim that they will deliver the best public services like never before. You've never seen anything like it in your life, whilst also reducing taxes. We've seen it time and again. What do we get? Poorer public services and higher taxes. We know that. But
it's funny how they keep getting elected on that message, though, isn't it, Phil?
They will offer the better public services and they will say they're going to reduce taxes. In fact, in the budget before next year's election, they will reduce taxes. They'll all be there. We've seen it time and again.
To be fair, Deletion Quarter, the don't knows in the polling have really reduced recently, and we have seen, especially in the post-fiscal event period, there's a lot of polling that's showing people moving from Conservative to Labour because they're very right-wing now, so they are courting the Conservative vote. People have made the switch, and it's unlikely they'll switch back. I think we are looking at a large Starmer majority at the next election, unless the left obviously completely abandon him, which they should, obviously. But of course, what's going to happen is that they're going to get into power in the next election in 2024. They're going to do nothing. They're going to get booted out after everyone's living standards continue to fucking suck, and we will have Britfash 2.0.
And if Labour do not play...
Well, obviously Corbyn increased his poll because he stood for something, had a good manifesto, literally had any amount of positive charisma and positive personal attributes. Whereas both Sunak and Starmer suck. So I would have to give the benefit of the doubt to the opposition rather than the incumbent, given the absolute state of the economy.
Play the game, they cannot possibly win against such a shiny offer. So how do Labour play the game without being as dirty as promising something they have no intention to deliver? They have to be careful with their choice of words. You deliberately leave a few blanks for people to fill in themselves, like a kid's activity book. You know, people have read this Byline Times article. In fact, they've mostly read like one.
It really is funny describing the electorate as the people who've been given like the paint by numbers colouring in book to be able to distract them whilst Labour Party do what they want to do, when that's literally what's happening to Phil. Phil is the target for this.
Paragraph, and concluded that Starmer is ruling out PR as a concept. This is not what he, or in this case his spokesperson, has said at all. The fact that they're still using the line "not a priority" is a giant dog whistle to electoral reform campaigners who are choosing to completely ignore it. The point of a dog whistle is you're supposed to hear it if you're the dog.
Yeah, the dog. Yeah, this isn't a dog whistle about what he's actually going to do. It's a dog whistle to make you think that it's something that might be on the table in the future. So you desperately keep supporting him in the hope that he'll do something that there's no reason for him to do. Right? Again, Phil keeps saying, "Oh, look, there's this magical open door. Just believe in the Starmer, and he'll eventually do it." Honestly, you no matter how many times he completely disagrees with you on every single political issue, he'll change tack when he gets elected. Just honestly, don't worry. Just keep voting for the incredibly right wing leader of the Labour Party, and he'll become very progressive eventually. I promise you. When that's why they're saying this is to get you to vote for them against your best interests. That's why they don't. You are being hoodwinked here, Phil. Don't know how many times I have to say this. Obviously, I'm responding to an old video or a recorded video, but I'm just reiterating the point for my viewers.
Not a priority means not right now. Put yourself in the position of a prospective Prime Minister or their spokesperson answering a question about PR if you didn't intend to go ahead with it. If you were actually going, no. Would you say not a priority? No, because that means you'll get around to it once your priorities are delivered. You would say, people don't want it, or, oh, it's got more problems than solutions, something like that. That's not what they're saying. You know, now, of course, saying not a priority doesn't prove that they are going to get around to it, but it does disprove the notion that they've shut the gate on the idea. Not a priority is wait and see.
I mean, it does shut the door on both of those. It does always leave it open for either of those things, right? Phil is correct in the most technical sense of correct, that it does indeed leave the door open for both not doing it and doing it by not giving a firm answer either way. He is just delusional enough to think that Starmer would do it despite it being bad for them electorally.
A well-known supporter of proportional representation within the parliamentary party, Clive Lewis, very vocal, he posed a couple of questions in a tweet about it to people who were going mad about it. He asked, how do you grow the movement and how do you escalate tactics? See, the problem that PR faces is the same problem that reversing Brexit faces. People in support of those policies don't want to address these steps. Maybe because it's a lot of effort. It will be a lot of effort. Or maybe because they already think that the ideas have widespread appeal amongst the public and it's only a small number of obstinate politicians standing in the way. Really not. Starmer is clearly completely focused on winning the election and delivering the changes he's set out. So the way to accelerate plans for reform, whether PR or rejoining the EU, is to mobilise and persuade. Mobilise so that the arguments are shared with as many people as possible, and persuade to make sure those arguments are compelling. It's no point in getting yourself heard and ranting.
So, okay, I agree. Actually, I will agree with both of these tactics. That's true. How is Keir Starmer persuading anybody that proportional representation is good? When has he ever done that at any time outside of the very short period in which he was trying to be the leader of the Labour Party? When else have you ever heard him talking about it? Ever, right? When have you ever heard him talking about it? You've never heard him talking about it. Oh, okay. Is it because he doesn't want to support it because it's not in his interests? Oh, well done. Brilliant. You worked it out. Okay, brilliant. We got there in the end. And that when, if he was genuinely trying to put that case to people, you think he would have said something about it. But potentially, the people who might not already be sold in it, rather than something that he, I don't know, maybe lied about, pretended to care about, to look like he was more progressive than he was when trying to get elected to the progressive wing, to the progressive members of the Labour Party. Maybe that might be the potential, the slight potential for that there, Phil. No, it's fine. You just keep buying your magic beans.
About a thing without being persuasive, because you change nobody's mind. You get everyone who already agrees with you going, yeah, right on, and everyone else who doesn't go, what was that about? Where the Remain argument went wrong in 2016 was in failing to demonstrate the benefits of being EU members. The focus was on the damage done by leaving, which was entirely hypothetical as far as many voters were concerned. And it was then easily dismissed as Project Fear by various schools in Parliament. We needed to point out things that were tangible, that we had, that we'd be losing. Because Starmer has said something else recently that's worth remembering. In an article, I think it was in The Economist, Starmer was reported to have been talking about his programme of reform, talking about how important it is, these sort of 5 platform areas. And he said anything, any policy which doesn't work to achieving these aims is dropped. It's like, we haven't got time for it. Anything which works towards it is being done. Well, the thing about Starmer's reforms is they may work out brilliantly, but as soon as the Tories return to office, and with the current system, they will return to office. Could be 10 years' time, could be 15, but they will come back.
It'll be 7 years' time, Phil, and you know it.
And then they can then destroy all of those reforms, and they can destroy them way quicker than it took to build. That right there is a powerful motivation for Starmer to adopt PR, but later on. Because think about it strategically. If he were to adopt PR...
No, but why? No, why? Like, they're a gigantic party. Like, whilst, you know, recently, under the previous leader, they were the biggest political party in Europe. Most members of political party in Europe. We've had 2-party politics in this country for 80 years almost at this point, right? Why do you think that's going to change anytime soon, to the point at which a leader from the Labour right wouldn't want to continue having first past the post, to continue having a stranglehold over the left-wing vote in the country? It's like this guy is addicted to not understanding anything.
Immediately. Can he get these reforms through? No. Because he'd have to form a coalition with, say, the Lib Dems. They wouldn't be in favour of it. There's no other party that's in favour of these reforms. But once the reforms are largely in place, it's also the case that other parties, other progressive parties, wouldn't seek to dismantle them. And also, if they're working with Labour anyway, they wouldn't be able to. So strategically, if you want these reforms in place, you need 100% of the power to do so. But then, once they're in, you then need to switch to...
What reforms? What reforms are you doing other than introducing more privatisation? Literally, he said, he just put out an article today in The Guardian saying that he's going to be bolder on public service reform than Blair. What do you think Blair's public service reforms were? More privatisation, PFIs, subcontractors, all this shit that started with Major and was continued with Blair, right? He means privatisation. These are reforms that the Conservatives want. What reforms, other than this, what reforms has he said about public services? Right? Anything that he said about reforming public services. They won't nationalise the water. They're nationalising trains. Right, okay, maybe they'll continue having the trains nationalised, but the Conservatives won't reverse that either, because they've already beaten the Labour Party to the punch on ensuring that there's more national control over rail delivery, because they've created their own state-owned enterprise called Great British Rail to try and reform somewhat the rail system as we have it at the moment. They've already been beaten to the punch on more government intervention with regards to the railways, and also there were a couple of franchises that got nationalised by the Tories over the pandemic as well, including the fact that the Caledonian Sleeper is now also nationalised too. Because we all know that the trains are going to have to be renationalised eventually, because the franchise system just doesn't fucking work. Everyone knows it doesn't work. The Tories know it doesn't work. It's going to happen eventually. So that's the easiest reform they could possibly do. Outside of that, what bold reforms is he saying other than NHS privatisation? Like, what other reforms is he saying? What other reforms? What bold reforms that might theoretically be dismantled by the Tories is he even promising? Deranged. It's deranged.
To defence. You need to defend them. Once they're in, it'll take some time. The Conservatives will start to be looking a bit more appealing to the public. At that point, PR will work towards his aims. But there we are.
I mean, it won't. It won't work towards his aims because of all the reasons I've laid out about the amount of power that you have within a two-party system because of first past the post, and how he doesn't want to lose control of the Labour left within the Labour Party to continue to have the power to be able to command huge swathes of the vote, whilst people's voting choices are constrained by the first past the post electoral system. He has no material interest in doing so, and this weird tangent that you've gone on about his theoretical reforms that he's not even going to do because all the reforms he's going to do are bad that wouldn't be reversed by the Tories. It doesn't make any sense, right? It's just cope. It's just cope. What we have watched there is 13 minutes and 37 seconds of pure unadulterated cope from someone who cannot admit that the man that he continually stands, despite all the bad things that he does, might or might not have his own personal best interest at heart. It's honestly, it's just cope. Just cope at this point. As you can see from all of the things that I've said in response. But if you enjoyed this content, you can like and subscribe. You can support me by becoming a member on YouTube for just 99p, or subscribing on Twitch for $3.99, or for free with Twitch Prime, or by making bits messages with text to speech on. If you're watching this live, or later, you can drop me bits if you're watching this, or join on. I have a Patreon now. You can join on Patreon if you really want. Patreon.com/NoJusticeMTG. If you want to give me money in a other different way than my other platforms. But anyway, other than that, I will catch you on the next segment.